boy, am I glad that we have stopped and are redoing what we did originally in the class, what we did the first 3 weeks, because we needed to. I am almost done with the comprehensive writing assignment grading. It's been a little bit more detailed and intensive than I had at first anticipated it would be, because a lot of it is me mining through your writing to find these examples. Even though you did as I asked and gave me a key and everything, it's still a little bit of a treasure hunt. So we're going to work on streamlining that a bit for the next one. But right now we're going to talk about complex sentences, because that is something we aren't getting. Complex sentences have two parts, and that's really it. They have a dependent clause and they have an independent clause. And that dependent clause can come before or after the independent clause. It doesn't matter. But what that dependent clause has to have in order to be a dependent clause, and therefore for the sentence to be complex, is that it needs to have a subject and a verb. That's what a dependent clause has to have. An independent clause has the exact same thing. It has a subject doing a verb. The only thing that separates an independent clause from a dependent clause is the subordinating conjunction. That's it. So you basically have two independent clauses, but you have a subordinating conjunction. That works like a coordinating conjunction works, right? So a coordinating conjunction works, as we remember, in a compound sentence by separating the two independent clauses. It uses a comma, always a comma, and then it separates, right? If you don't use a comma, you have a comma splice. So, or a run-on. Comma splice would be using a comma without a coordinating conjunction as a semicolon is supposed to work. That's a comma splice. You can't have a comma doing the semicolon's job. A comma cannot do the job of a semicolon. A comma has to have a coordinated conjunction with it if you're separating two independent clauses, right? So if you're making a compound sentence, that's the arrangement. Well, a complex sentence works very similarly. The only difference is when you have the dependent clause coming after the independent clause, you often do not need a comma there. In fact, almost always you don't. So if you had like, because the sky was blue, I sang happily that day, right? Okay, so because the sky was blue, comma, that is a dependent clause. Why? Because it has because. If it didn't have because, it would just say the sky was blue, which is an independent clause, which means it can stand alone as a sentence. That's it. It has a subject doing a verb, right? The sky is being blue. The sky is being, right? The to be verb, right? The infinitive is there. Okay, so that's it. And so if you say, I sang happily that day because the sky was blue, you don't need a comma there. You don't need a comma separating because and the independent clause, okay? Because the independent or the dependent clause is coming after the independent clause. That's a general rule, okay? So let's practice with some other ones. I'm going to pause myself so I can pull up a few more examples.